Day 149 of 365 days of meditation. I'm not recording the video right after meditating. I was up at 4 a.m. today, meditated for about an hour and 35 minutes. So from 4 a.m. to about 5:35, 5:40, something like that. And as always, early morning meditation, 3, 4 a.m. I always find them the best. There's just something about that time. I don't know what it is. Maybe the state that the brain is in at that time. But I just seem to get a lot out of them when I'm just sitting there in the stillness and in the quiet of the early morning. Today's meditation, I touched on a few things. I touched on a recent disagreement I had with my wife, and trying to figure out what about it that had bothered me, and I realized it boiled down to like a sense of rejection, and then that tied into a sense of rejecting myself, and I did that very much when I was younger, struggling with my mental health, and looking around, nobody there, so blaming myself, and really not happy with myself as a result of what I was going through. Other things in life where there's things I wanted to do where I feel like I sort of abandoned myself, or rejected the things that I wanted to do in favor of doing things that other people expected of me. These are not uncommon things. I think a lot of people experiencing them at some point in their life. Maybe others don't. If you're lucky, you don't. But I did, and I think that's why sort of this feeling of rejection really hit a nerve for me. Obviously realizing that it's not necessarily rational. It's very emotional, and it's tied to past experiences. The other thing I stumbled across today was I asked the question, why do I avoid certain tasks? Tasks that aren't necessarily that hard. I do things that are much more difficult, but I just kind of put them off. And I thought, fear of failure, and I was like, nah, that's not it. Fear of success, maybe, not really. What I actually realized was it's a fear of it being too easy, which sounds really weird, but I think it's rooted in this idea that everything needs to be difficult. At least when I sort of inquired why, it's rooted in the idea of struggle. Everything is only worthwhile if it's a struggle. If it's not hard enough, then it's a waste of time, or it's not worthwhile. And I think at some point in my life, I really internalized that idea. And it was modeled for me, I'm sure. But yeah, not super useful. I also realized, thinking about it, that the only way to help somebody who's sort of living that way is to model a different way for them. So don't follow the same pattern. Model success without massive struggle. I do think that's possible. Some people say it's not, but I think it is. I mean, you can't achieve anything without some I don't know if efforting is the right word, but taking strides forward. But it doesn't have to be this massive struggle. And I also realized that when somebody is struggling, the best thing that you can do for that person is simply just listen to them. You can't talk them out of their struggle. You cannot talk another person out of their struggle or the difficulties they're having. It's easy when you're on the outside looking in, but when you're on the inside and you're stuck in it, and there's all the emotion and all the history and beliefs and gunk all sort of mixed together, you're not going to talk somebody out of irrational behavior. So the best thing you can do is just kind of support them and listen. That was a couple interesting things that popped into my mind. I also, because I guess it's a hot topic issue, it seems to be everywhere in media, social media these days, is gender identity popping up everywhere. And I was thinking to myself, like, what is bothering me about this sort of mainstream narrative around this topic? Like, what is it that kind of, I don't like it. I can't put my finger on it. Something about makes me uncomfortable. And so I did a little inquiry, and I realized that it's rooted in a fear of people who are potentially, and I don't know if this is what's going on, but there's a fear that people who are struggling with their mental health are being pushed towards a path that is profitable for others, to literally, perform surgery to change the way they look and their actual identity in order to potentially mask over some underlying pain, trauma, difficulties that are not being addressed. And again, I don't think this is necessarily the case with everybody, but I have watched some interviews of people talking about having gone through these processes and also having a ton of mental health struggles. And yeah, I worry actually more than anything that people that actually need some assistance are maybe being preyed on in the name of profit. And I was thinking about, like, where does that come from? And I realized it's because I've had somebody in my life who was struggling with their mental health, and when they went to a doctor to talk about it, all the doctor told them was, I can't help you until you take this antidepressant. And this person was very disappointed in that, and went and saw a second opinion from another doctor, and that doctor ordered some blood work, was a lot more thorough, and realized that through the blood work that they were extremely anemic. In fact, the doctor said to them, I don't even know how you're functioning, you're so anemic, and prescribed them some high potency iron, and the person took that, and then their mental health started to recover quite rapidly. So one person offering sort of a real tangible solution that was helpful and addressed the root of the issue, and another person trying to just mask over it and push them down a pathway where medicine is a wonderful thing, but also there's, I think, a lot of drugs being pushed out there that are simply in the name of profit, that are not necessarily helpful, because it is profitable, and it can be profitable for doctors who are prescribing it. And I've said this before, when you venture into the world of mental health or health in general, you need to really advocate for yourself, because just like in any profession, there are some doctors out there who are absolutely exceptional at what they do. They're passionate about it, they're compassionate, they really want the best for you. And there's other ones who, sunk cost. They went through, they got their degree, they put in all this time and effort, and now they're kind of just grinding through being a doctor day in, day out, and don't really enjoy it. It's no different than any other profession. There are people who do it and love it, and there are people who do it and they're just doing it because they're doing it and for no other reason. So very different quality of care, obviously, depending on which one you come across. So yeah, having somebody I know quite well and care about having gone through that made me sort of wonder if there's an element of that going on, potentially. And I sure hope not, but I was able to identify what sort of was making me a little bit uncomfortable about this discussion that's going on in the public right now. Yeah, what else popped up? YouTube videos. So at one point, I was kind of thinking about certain things would pop into my mind, and I would think, oh, maybe I should say that, like in the YouTube video. That'd be interesting for a YouTube video, potentially. And then I asked myself the question, like, why does it even matter? Why am I shooting these YouTube videos? And like, what is the point of shooting these YouTube videos? And so I thought, like, back to a point in time where I was struggling a lot with my mental health. It was the last time I was, and the most recent time, I should say. And I came across this YouTube video where the father was talking about his son who had committed suicide. And the father mentioned the fact that, he had struggles and difficult, mental, emotional things occur in his lifetime, just as every human being does. And he always made a point of not talking about them with his family, because he didn't want to burden his family. And he didn't want to bring difficult things to, his young children. He thought he was protecting them from these difficult things. And after his son committed suicide, what he realized was that his son was suffering, he was struggling, and he had never seen anyone else talk about the types of things that he was going through, not talk about the difficulties of his life. And because it was never modeled for him, he felt like he was somehow an anomaly, and this wasn't normal for people to experience this. And he didn't feel comfortable talking about it because he'd never seen anyone else talk about it. And ultimately he suffered in silence until he sort of sought a way out of the pain through suicide, ultimately. And, obviously when I watched that video back then, and even I think about it now, is, heartbreaking for the father, but also for this young man who lost his life way, way too early. And I realized, yeah, that's the purpose of these videos. It's just a good reminder, like, where did the drive to do this come from? And I really think that may have been the crux of it, because after watching that video, I'd watched a few other ones, but I remember after watching that, I had actually reached out for some help after that, not too long after that. And so I think it may have pushed me over the edge a little bit. So, I hope that maybe one of these videos reaches the right person at the right time and encourages them to not just to no longer suffer in silence and reach out and get some help that they may need. Yeah, so that was the meditation. I mean, I sort of summarized that, I guess. A bit of a longer video, but immediately after the meditation, even though I wasn't shooting the video because I didn't want to wake my wife up, I immediately jotted down sort of all the notes of the things that occurred and just point form, so that it would be fresh in my mind afterwards. And yeah, notes were helpful. Also helpful processing a little further. But, one of the things I didn't touch on was the meditation itself. As I'm going through and I'm revisiting these things about rejection and rejection of self and fear and suffering and struggle and all these things I just talked about, like, I try to go back and think of times where I experienced that and, revisit my younger self who was going through that and sort of console and encourage and, be understanding towards and empathetic towards that younger self who went through some trying times. And it seems to be difficult and helpful simultaneously. It's never fun to cry. Definitely not fun to have an ugly cry, but, I feel better after. I feel lighter. I feel like I got some crap off my chest that needs to come out, so to speak, and I just feel a lot better when I'm done. So, yeah, that magic of that 4 a.m. meditation once again pays off. That's it for today. In closing, I'll say, as always, if you're struggling at all with your mental health, don't suffer in silence. Talk to somebody, talk to somebody, talk to somebody. A lot of people have been there and struggled with their mental health. A lot of people have, felt anxious or depressed or suicidal or unable to cope and just miserable day to day. And, there's hope. You can get out the other side. There's a better life that's possible for you, I would say. And, the first step is doing something different than what you've done to this date. So if you haven't talked to somebody before, simply bringing it up and having that conversation can be a step towards a future that you really can't predict, which is what you want, because if what you're doing is the same old and predictable and miserable, it's time for something new. Yeah, that's it for today. Hope that was helpful. Don't feel quite the same level of energy as I had this morning because it's now late and I'm tired, but yeah, again, hope this was helpful. Be good to yourself, be good to others. Have a great day.